Hi everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. Sorry for missing last Thursday's video, but there has been some in-real-life stuff happening that I've been dealing with, and I'm not in the best place to be honest, though I've been doing my best to plow through it. So enough of me being a downer. So let's get to a story about a Dungeons & Dragons player that uses the game as a form of therapy, which in turn ruins the game for everyone else. To the post. I think a player used real trauma to hijack my campaign, and I don't know if I even want to DM anymore. By Reddit user Adhesiveness Signal 85. I don't even know how to explain this properly. I haven't run a session in months, and I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting, but every time I try to plan something, I just get stuck, like completely shut down. Even just writing this feels weird, like I'm doing something wrong. So, I had this homebrew campaign with a pretty simple setup. 3 players I trust, and 1 new guy, Dave, who a friend brought in. I didn't know him, but whatever. I'm always happy to bring new people in. He said he was super into roleplay, deep characters, and emotional arcs, so I figured cool. Sounded like a good fit. His character was this warlock whose wife died in a fire that was somehow tied to his patron. The whole backstory was about how he lost everything, and now he's basically running on pain, guilt, and revenge. A bit intense, but I've run emotional arcs before, so I figured I'd find a way to balance it. In the first session, he barely talked. Everyone else was joking around and building group chemistry. But Dave's character just sat there. When someone tried to talk to him, he goes, "I don't speak to people who still have hope," or something like that. Everyone kinda just laughed, but it killed the mood a bit. It just kept going from there. Like every single time people tried to joke around, connect, or even just do a normal scene, Dave would throw in something super heavy. Stuff like, "He stares at the fire, thinking of the screams." Or, "The world ended for me a long time ago." I'm not exaggerating. It was constant. And the worst part is, he wouldn't interact with the others. He would just say stuff like that out loud and go quiet again. I started feeling like I didn't know how to run the game anymore. Nobody said anything directly, but everyone started pulling back. The energy just changed. People stopped doing voices or joking around, or even making choices. Like, they were waiting to see if Dave was going to do his pain monologue again. So I messaged him and tried to gently say that the tone was a little off from the rest of the group, and maybe we could find ways to connect his character more. He then told me that the character was based on real grief, and that playing him was part of processing something. He said it helped him, and after that, I felt like I couldn't say anything. Like, if I pushed back at all, I was being cruel or insensitive. And then I did this session where everyone got a vision based on their backstory. Everyone was on board with it. When it got to Dave's character, I said something like, "You see your wife standing in the ruins." I used the exact setting and details he'd written in his backstory. I did not add anything graphic. I thought I was being respectful, and he just froze. He didn't say anything for like a minute. Then he goes, "This is disgusting. You know this is real for me," and just leaves the call. I was just sitting there with my heart in my throat. I felt like I'd done something horrible, but I didn't know how. He gave me that backstory. I literally used what he wrote. I didn't add anything dramatic or twist it or anything. But now, it felt like I'd stepped on something huge and invisible. I ended the session early, and nobody really said anything. It was just this heavy silence. One of the players said, "I don't even know if we're allowed to play anymore," and it stuck with me. I shut the campaign down the next day, said that I needed a break, and everyone understood. Someone messaged me and said that they'd been feeling anxious for weeks and didn't know how to say anything. And now, I can't even start a new game. I've tried. I've written outlines, drawn maps, made NPCs, but then I remember that feeling of everything going cold. I start wondering what kind of backstory someone's gonna hand me, and whether it's safe or not to even touch it. Or if I'm gonna accidentally hurt someone again. Or if someone's gonna turn the game into something I don't even recognize, and I won't know how to stop it without feeling like the bad guy. I just wanted to tell stories with my friends. Now I feel like I can't trust myself to run anything at all. Man, that sucks. Now, I understand how playing D&D can be therapeutic for some people. Heck, it is for me at some times. But to use it directly as a parallel to actual in real life stuff is not the way to go. And it isn't fair to the other players or the DM running the game. That player was being extremely selfish when he did this, especially when he flipped out on the Dungeon Master for bringing up a backstory for his character that he wrote, making the DM doubt themselves on whether or not they can take the story in certain directions. If anything, my advice to OP would be to just gather the rest of their friends that they were playing with before bringing this player in, and just continuing the game without him. That player's baggage is his business, and if he really needs help processing stuff, he should seek out professional help, not hijack someone's tabletop role-playing game as a way to do so. But with that said, let's move on to a story about a dungeon master that might be a tad too obsessed with traps. To the post. The Dungeon Master Obsessed with Traps by Reddit user Lightside Soul. The title says it all. My group had a dungeon master that was so trap happy, it got him banned from ever DMing again. Our cast: Trapman, the titular trap-obsessed dungeon master. Alexander, our human rogue. Bearclaw, our orc barbarian. Trick, our gnome artificer. And yours truly, the dragonborn sorcerer. The traps included a pressure plate trap at the entrance of the first dungeon that sprayed acid on whoever set it off, a rockfall trap that had no visible trigger, a spike trap in a random hallway that led to a storage room, a pitfall trap we'd just watched the master of the dungeon run over without slowing or looking down. Of course, these were all in a dungeon, so we just assumed it was how the bad guys set it up. Then we got into town to sell our loot, restock, and all that jazz. We checked into the inn for the night, and Alexander decided to rogue and snuck out through the window and started casing houses and businesses. He found the general store had a poison dart trap in the handle of the front door. Town Hall had a swinging axe trap. Several homes had traps that could kill a common NPC. And then he got caught by a needle trap trying to sneak back into his room. The innkeeper tried to make us pay for an antidote, and Bearclaw haggled. At this point, we were annoyed, but willing to keep playing. The point he went too far was in session 3. You see, at this point, we'd gotten pretty good at sussing out his traps, and Trick even managed to disarm and disassemble most of them to sell off the parts, so we were sitting on a decent amount of gold. We decided to buy a small plot of land and build a small keep on it, somewhere to rest between missions and stuff. We paid for the land and called and had it built by workers gained through the connections to the party, members of Bearclaw's tribe, and Trick's family. We time-skipped to the keep being complete. The first night, we decided to do some fluff role-playing, just seeing how our characters interacted at rest. I went to the library to do some reading. A pit trap. There was a pit trap after the door to the library, and it actually killed me. That's about when I exploded. You see, I'm the type of guy that it takes a lot to get mad. I can take people setting up traps in their own homes and businesses. But in case you forgot, this keep was not only freshly built, but designed by us, the players, and none of us okayed any traps in the interior. Trapman, of course, tried to justify it, but we all shut him down by pointing out that we were sick of the traps. So why would we have them in our own home? Why wouldn't the people we paid to build it have warned us about them? Why would the builders put these traps in without asking if we wanted them? When he refused to tell us where these traps in our own home were, we finally just stopped playing, packed up, went home, and set up a new game with a different member of the group DMing the next week. None of us ever joined a game Trapman ran again. Yeah, I would say that Trapman sounded like he was a bit overly obsessed with traps. Sure, they can be fun to have here and there in dungeons, and even with some paranoid townsfolk, but putting them into the party's own dwelling, and even having one of them kill OP's character is, well, overkill. I don't blame the group for just giving up on that game after that. I mean, I would find it pretty annoying to have to investigate for traps every 5 seconds, and even in places that you would assume would be safe. Perhaps this dungeon master should just get his trap fix in by playing the deception games or something. And also, kudos to those who know what I'm talking about. But anyways, at least it sounds like the group rectified the situation by just having someone else DM instead. Now, before we move on, I just gotta give a quick thanks to Bangzabear for donating $10 via Ko-Fi and simply saying, "For the kitties." So thank you, Bangzabear. The kitties will be getting some extra treats on you. But with that, let's move on to a story about a player that just doesn't really like gods of any kind. To the post. Quickest I've ever seen a player booted from a game. Warning, mentions of SA. By Reddit user Admiral Snafu. Our group recently allowed a newcomer to join our currently level 8 campaign. We'll call him Doug. He wanted to roll a wizard, even though we already had one. So he asked to roll an abjuration wizard. Immediately during in-character introduction, he acts condescendingly towards the cleric and myself, a divine soul sorcerer, but says that it's a character quirk that he considers arcane magic better than divine. Okay, fine. Then we get into combat. Our berserker gets 2 unlucky crits on himself, and so the cleric naturally decides to heal him. Doug. I cast Counterspell and say, "We don't need some Sky Daddy's interference." The Dungeon Master calls a halt to the game to ask WTF Doug is doing. Doug, as it turns out, is so virulently atheist and anti any sort of religion, even in fiction, that he can't tolerate any positive portrayal of a god. Our cleric says, "Dude, it's just a game." Then Doug flies off the handle, screaming, spittle flying, and red-faced at cleric about how he's enabling religious zealots, and insinuates that cleric's player SA's little kids. Cleric stands up and is obviously ready to start throwing punches. Our dungeon master is having none of this nonsense and tells Doug he's out. He tried to flip the table on the way out, failing to do so due to 2 other players holding it down, and slammed the door behind him as he stormed out. To quote the rogue's player, "Did that actually just happen?" Cards on the table. As a kid, I had some negative religious experiences. For example, everything not Christian is demonic. Paddling is a first resort. The accuser of a minor is always right, etc. However, I don't let that taint my view of people who either believe there's something more to the world or want to play as a healer whose god actually lets them heal the sick and wounded. Namely because my characters have a bad habit of going, "What does this button do?" and then requiring magical healing or resurrection. But I digress. Yeah, this dude sounded like he takes things way too seriously if he lets fictional deities allowing heals get to him so much. I personally am religious, but I never push that on people. but I do realize that there are people out there that do so. And the same can be said for atheists. Most I know are just live and let live, but you will get those that treat being atheist almost like a religion itself. But anyway, at least in this instance, it sounds like the trash took itself out, and the group can continue having fun playing. Now, let's move on to a tale about a dungeon master that tricks a player into becoming an example for the rest of her players. To the post. Invited to a game because the game master needed someone to make an example of. By Reddit user Foaming Kobolds. This is about 8 years ago, in my DnD 3.5 days. A game master and mod from one of my Discord servers, let's call her Zam, reached out to me because they, quote, needed a player to balance out the party. I was told in no uncertain terms that this was a high optimization game, to go ham with the weird and to have fun. So I did. I made a Bloodstorm blade, wielding an exploding caber. Fun, not too high damage, and uses a neat shenanigan as its core mechanic. Now, before we go any further, it is important to note that during every step of the character generation process, I was in contact with Zam. I explained in detail how the combo works. I use Bloodstorm Blade's ability to hit every viable target, plus caber targeting squares instead of enemies to hit a wide area of effect. Sam said it was a hilarious idea. In the character sheet sent to her, I had every single ability set up as a hyperlink to the SRD, or DnD Tools page, for the section in question. We made damn sure before the game that everything was perfect. The night before the session, quoting Zam, "Yeah, this is fine. You're a little undertuned compared to some of the others, but it'll be fine for what I need." I guess that right there was the big red flag. Cut to the day of the game. Everything is going good. We get to the first combat, and everything is cool. The wizard goes first and obliterates half of the field, as you do. I managed to get second on the initiative order and announce my attack, doing a cool 8d6 damage to a single target. And Zam effing explodes. "How the F dare you bring this broken crap to my table, kobold?" This, needless to say, came as quite the shock, as we had worked together to build this character. So I tried to say as such, but she responds, "You gaslight me at my own table? You're lucky I don't ban you from the effing server." And with that, I'm kicked from the game, given a year-long ban from joining any game on that server, and I'm told via direct messages that if I so much as think about reaching out to the other mods about this, that it would end very poorly for me. Later, I found out from another individual in the game that shortly after I was kicked, everyone else was given an ultimatum. Fix your characters or you're next. And that I was constantly being used as an example of a bad player. I did try to reach out to the other mods, and was told that Zam is a wonderful person who would never do such a thing, and that insinuating otherwise would not be tolerated. TLDR, did exactly what a game master asked me to do, only to discover that it was a trap all along to manipulate her other players into changing while getting a free excuse to vent anger at someone. Well, that is a really messed up thing to do to someone. Lure them in and guide their character creation, only to turn and act like they were trying to power game, kick them out, and then proceed to drag their name through the mud as an example because you wanted more control over your players? Plus, it seems like this bitch had a bunch of mods in that server convinced that she was a sweet little princess. If I were OP, I would tell them to all get screwed and just go find another server to find games in. I mean, that is completely messed up, and I wouldn't even want to stick around after that BS. So hopefully, OP can find a new server to join, and that DM will get some sort of karmatic justice for being so manipulative. Now, before we move on to the next post, if you could, It would be awesome if you could roll a crit on the like button, and subscribe if you aren't already. And to help convince you further, here is Simba and Luna stalking me for treats. They sure do let me know when it's treat time. But with that, let's get to a story about a group of players that just won't let the Dungeon Master lead them to the beginning of their adventure. To the post. Table doesn't want to be railroaded, but then asks to be railroaded. By Reddit user Imaginary Army 2592. About 6 months ago, I got a group together for a campaign. Everyone wrote backstories, and we all agreed to have those backstories tied into the main scenario of the game. Session 1 rolls around, and I narrate how each character's backstory connects to the overarching plot, explaining why this group of adventurers is heading out on this particular journey. Then, player A says, "Hey GM, can my backstory not be used to force my character into going on the adventure?" The rest of the group chimes in with similar concerns. I shrug and say, "Alright, you each receive a MacGuffin, something asking you personally for help with this area." Next, player B asks, "Wait, can we adventure near our hometown instead? Maybe say goodbye to friends and family." Again, the rest of the group jumps in with support. I say, "Sure, you can say your goodbyes to whoever you'd like, but the actual adventure takes place over an X area, which none of your backstories are tied to." Player A then suggests, "Well, can you tie our backstories to our hometown and run the adventure here instead?" I reply, "There is no adventure here. The story happens over an X area." Then they responded, "That's railroading. We don't have a choice in the matter." The rest of the party agrees, so I say, "Okay, what do you want to do in your hometown?" Player C shrugs and says, "I don't know. What is there to do nearby?" I point out, "You've just received a call for aid." Player A replies, "But that's railroading. What can we do here instead?" I respond, "This is your party's hometown. You tell me. What is the area famous for? What makes it interesting?" The party then says, "We don't want to narrate anything." So I say, "Then there's nothing interesting enough here for your player characters to do. The only active thread is the call for help." And again, the response is, "That's railroading." At that point, I gave up and just canceled the game. Holy crap, I could almost hear the facepalming coming through that story. Now, I realize that there are DMs out there that railroad to a degree that doesn't let the players do anything that they want or give them any autonomy. But in games like Dungeons & Dragons, some railroading is needed for things to be a bit cohesive, especially at the beginning of a campaign. I'm sure OP had spent time writing a launchpad for the campaign to start from, and the players refusing to even want to go to the town that things were supposed to start in had to be pretty frustrating. So after multiple attempts at trying to get the players on the path, I can understand OP just noping out of there. But with that, let's get to the next one, where a player just can't stand sports ball. To the post. No normie talk during the game. By Reddit user Warm Kitten. I game master a weekly Pathfinder game on Discord. We all met via this game, and it just so happens that we're all interested in sports to varying degrees. We had a player drop because of real life, and I went looking for a replacement. I interviewed a guy who seemed pretty good, and we were off to the races. For the first couple of sessions, it was just slightly annoying, but manageable. He'd make a big production of sighing into his microphone if the subject of sports was brought up. This wasn't often, sometimes as a metaphor to illustrate a point, but mostly during the mid-session break. He made a big show of not knowing sports references, which was odd, but bearable. Then, in the mid-session break of Session 3, The dam broke. This dude went off. He started ranting about how people who play RPGs ought to know better, how pointless sports ball is, and how he plays RPGs to escape from normie stuff. After he got no support from anyone in chat, he left the server and blocked us all. Well, that is a stupid reason to leave a game over. I mean, mid-session break conversations can take all sorts of forms. For example, there are a few times when the subject of Magic the Gathering or Pokemon comes up during my games, before and mid-session. And I don't throw a fit because I don't really know much or care about that stuff. I just chill and listen to their conversations while waiting for the game to start up again. But I guess some people just feel like they need to be a part of everything all the time. Now, this video has been going on for a bit, but I feel like I owe you all a bit of a longer one this time. So let's do one more story about some veteran players using their experience to walk all over some newbies. To the post. New to D&D and feeling shut down by veteran players. How should I handle this? By Reddit user, No Birthday. I'm new to D&D, and I'd love some advice on how to deal with a situation that's been bothering me at my table. A friend of mine, let's call him Luke, was invited by his buddy, Sam, to join a new campaign. It's Sam's first time DMing, and the rest of the players already know each other from a previous game. Sam said they were looking for one more player, so Luke invited me to join too. Neither Luke nor I had played before, but I've always wanted to try D&D, and had watched lots of videos to get a feel for it. I came in excited and ready to engage with the world. We're now about 9 sessions in, and I've started to notice a pattern that's making the game less enjoyable for both of us. The veteran players seem to play very safe. They focus strictly on the main quest, do exactly what's expected, and rush back for the reward. It feels like they're just waiting for the DM to point them toward the next objective. To be clear, the DM is not railroading us or holding our hands. In fact, whenever I ask questions that go off the main path, he seems excited and always has something ready. It feels like he wants us to explore and dig deeper, but the rest of the party doesn't bite. They just move from A to B and don't really engage, unless it's obviously part of the quest. I tend to be more skeptical of NPCs and enjoy asking questions or proposing other options, but whenever I speak up, one of the more experienced players tells me to shut up, or that I should think before I speak, because he thinks my questions could offend the NPCs, and that we should be polite. Luke is playing a rogue, and loves the trickster vibe, pickpocketing, messing with people, and doing rogue stuff. Sure, it's gotten us into trouble a couple of times, but it's also led to some cool discoveries. Still, he's constantly told to behave and stop trying things that aren't part of the obvious plan. It feels like they don't like that Luke does rogue stuff, but on the other hand, that's his character. And from his backstory, he has a good reason why his character would behave like that. Plus, I think that if he would suddenly change to fit the party's desire, it wouldn't be believable from a roleplay point of view. I get that we're part of a team and need to work together, but it feels like anything Luke or I suggest is written off as chaotic or disruptive. There was one session where we rescued a boy and brought him back to his quote-unquote father. The party immediately went with, "We don't want a reward, we're just doing the right thing." But Luke said, "Well, I care about the reward," and the group snapped at him. I asked the man, "If you care so much about your son, why were you drunk instead of looking for him?" And I was told to be quiet and let them handle it. It turns out, the kid wasn't even his son. He tried to run away, and we realized we handed him back to his kidnappers. I can't help but feel like if we'd been allowed to ask questions and push a little harder, we might have uncovered that earlier. But instead, it's always, go to X, do Y, get Z, and wait for the next quest marker. It feels like we're not being taken seriously because we're new. We're trying to contribute and engage with the story, but our input gets dismissed or shut down, and it feels discouraging. Has anyone else run into this kind of dynamic? How can I bring this up without starting drama? I just want the game to be more collaborative and immersive, not just a checklist of objectives. Thanks in advance for any advice. Edit. Since most people ask what exactly Luke's roguish behavior was, he tried to pickpocket 5 times in 7 sessions, and it was all good until he rolled twice in a row a nat 1 on sleight of hand checks and was caught. Ever since, he was prohibited from pickpocketing by another party member. But besides that, he also spooked people with an invisible mage hand. Yeah, it kinda sounds like the other players are preventing OP and his friends from doing any sort of roleplay, just because they have more experience. But it also sounds like these experienced players don't much care for the roleplay part of D&D at all, and are kinda treating it like a video game by just getting a quest, doing said quest, and then moving on to the next. Honestly, I feel like the DM should step in whenever the other players are preventing OP and his friend from roleplaying, and tell them to stop telling OP and his friend how to play. Especially as it seems like the DM actually gets excited whenever OP and his friend start to interact with the NPCs and such. So my advice would be to talk to the DM and the players to let them know how OP feels. I mean, I realize that OP doesn't want to cause any drama, but just not saying anything won't fix anything. Communication is a key component to any successful tabletop RPG, and if the other players realize how much they are affecting the new players, they might just change what they're doing. Though, what do you all think on this one? I'd love to hear what suggestions you would give OP here. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I really do appreciate all of you, and I hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.